Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the February Career Confidence Corner. I'm really excited to be talking with you today about clearly learning the legal landscape, gaining the information that you need to make some of the decisions that you need in your career. Just by way of brief introduction, my name is Gina Alexandris. I am a legal career coach, and I practiced law for a few years, and then I moved on to legal education for a couple of decades, and then I became a legal career coach. My passion is to helping people in the legal profession find the path that most excites them and that most resonates with them. And I decided to create these monthly videos with a focus each month on various themes so that I could offer to anybody who wants skills, knowledge, and confidence to legal professionals in carving out the path that they want. This month's theme, as we said, is clearly learning the legal landscape. And it came to me, quite frankly, with the help of the iPhone for as I was driving around one day. And I realized that for older viewers who might be watching this, you may remember having a Pearlie's map, a book of maps that help guide you from one place to the other. Well, these days, almost everybody has a Siri or an Alexa or a Waze or a Google Maps or all of those on their very own phones that can serve as a map. And why do I love these maps, or why do I love these map guides, the modern technological map guides? I really think that they are analogous to understanding the legal career landscape and understanding, whoops, let's just keep it there, understanding how we navigate our careers and how important it is to understand our careers. One of the things, just to think about the analogy a little bit further, is when you log on to one of these apps, Google Maps or Waze or it's Siri, for example, you could ask for multiple options. So you could see the different routes to take from point A to point B. You can add a point C and a point D if you need to. You can find out which one is the quickest route. You can find out which one is the shortest route. You can find out which takes you through highways, which one avoids bridges, which one avoids certain tolls. So you take into account time, you take into account landscape that you want to see, you take into account the cost of the various possibilities. And along the way, you can also see with these wonderful map guides the resources that are nearby. So you can see the gas stations that are near your destination or along the way. You could see the restaurants that are along the way. You could even see the possible parking options that are where you want to get to or along the way as you need to. So this month, what I thought about is that the legal landscape is really important, and it's important for you to have a map, a roadmap of the big picture legal landscape to help you get from point A to point B. And if you have to add a point C or D, you can add that point as you want to go through it. Now, of course, what I also wanted to remind you is that remembering or understanding what the map is like or the legal landscape is like comes after you've had the first step done. And that first step, if you went back to the video, number one in this series, is deeply reflecting and knowing yourself. The expectation at this stage is that you've taken some time to think about your strengths, your priorities, your values, and you have a sense of where you want to go. So just as an example, I have a sense that when I'm turning on my navigation system, I know that I want to find my nearby restaurant, or I want to find a nearby cafe. So I have a sense of where my destination is. Pardon me for things flipping forward. I have a sense of where the destination is, and I am able to explore it using the map and figure out what the best pathway to get to it is. So in this instance, what I want to ensure is that if you haven't had a chance to think about your values, strengths, and priorities, go back to the first video, watch that, and then come back to this video as you talk about the landscape that we're going to be looking at. What I want to do in this video is to cover a couple of things. First of all, understanding the educational and licensing requirements to become a lawyer in Canada. And specifically, I'm going to be limiting it to a common law lawyer, not addressing the pathways for civil lawyers, not in this video at least. The second part is I want to understand the various employment options open to lawyers. And the third thing is to think about other pathways that lawyers and law graduates can consider. Now, while some of this information may be very well known to some of you. For others, it might be brand spanking new. So I want you to have a listen to it at each stage. And for others, it might be a refresher. You may have forgotten about the different pathways or the different possibilities. So stay tuned and stay on this roadway with me as we explore the legal career landscape together. The first thing that I want to talk about then is the educational licensing requirements. And just a reminder to everybody, the two elements of becoming a lawyer in Canada. The first element are the educational requirements that you have, and the second element are the licensing requirements. There are two separate expectations and requirements, and they're both very important, and they are both, there are pathways within each that you can take. So I just wanted to spend a few moments on each of them. So with regards to the educational requirements, for those of you who have or are or plan to stay in Canada to do your legal education, that typically means that you're going to be pursuing a degree known as the Juris Doctor, the JD degree. And that is typically a 3-year degree unless you are doing a joint program. So some of the law schools that we have in Canada allow you to add an extra year and combine your studies in law with a number of other things. It could be your MBA, it could be social work, it could be engineering. There are a number of different programs at different schools that allow you to do 2 degrees in 4 years as opposed to the JD only in 3 years. There's a very specific process to becoming a law applicant. And what I would say is just remember that you need to ensure that you start about a year earlier than the year that you want to apply to be a law student. So if you're thinking of becoming a law student in 2025 in September, the process really starts for you in 2024. We'll leave this for additional information for those who might want it. Feel free to reach out to me, but I just wanted to remind people that that's one pathway to complete your educational requirements. The other pathway, which many lawyers in Ontario and in the rest of Canada complete, is through the National Committee of Accreditation, and that's for our internationally trained lawyers. ITLs, which is a short form that I might use from time to time, come from two different sources. One is that you might have been an undergraduate student or sometimes a high school student here in Canada and have decided to do your legal degree abroad and then return to Canada for the next phase. The other reason is that you might have immigrated here to Canada after having completed law school and perhaps practiced for a number of years in other jurisdictions. So it's part of the educational requirements because if you are in that category where you haven't completed your law degree in Canada but have received your legal training elsewhere, the equivalent to you of a JD is to seek, apply for, and complete the requirements of a certificate of qualification through the National Committee on Accreditation. And so the NCA will assess your criteria that you've already had, will determine what requirements there are, and then you will be expected to complete those requirements so that you could receive a certificate of qualification, which is the equivalent to a Canadian law degree. So the educational requirements, therefore, are twofold. One, to complete a JD, or two, to complete the NCA requirements and receive your certificate of qualification. And in terms of the certificate of qualification, there's a number of resources. Please feel free to email me or to connect with me if you want to learn more about the NCA process, if that is the path that you're taking. Once you've completed the educational requirements, you're not yet a lawyer. Remember that. And regardless if you're listening to this and you're a 7th-year lawyer, 8th-year lawyer, just really helpful to go back and remember the educational requirements was one part of your journey. The next part of your journey is the licensing requirements. Now, there are various requirements across Canada. Each province is regulated by its own law society, and the law societies in each province are the regulating bodies for all lawyers and in some instances paralegals in their province. So in Ontario, it's the Law Society of Ontario. And there are 3 requirements in Ontario, at least, with regards to completing your licensing requirement. One is an experiential piece. You have to ensure that you show to the Law Society that you have completed a learning experience through either articling for 10 months or the law practice program for 8 months, or that you have completed a law degree that is qualified as an integrated practice curriculum, the IPC. And there are two schools right now, Lakehead and Toronto Metropolitan University, that offer the IPC. So those are the three ways that you can complete the experiential requirement. There's a fourth option for internationally trained lawyers who may have a lot of experience in their home jurisdiction and can satisfy the Law Society that they are able to waive the experiential requirement. So that's an option as well. Whether or not you pursue that path depends really on what your long-term goals might be. And that's another question that we can have if you'd want. So experiential component is the first part. Then there are the licensing exams. These are what most people refer to as the bar exams. And I want to refer to it by its correct name, the licensing exams, because there are two exams that candidates have to complete successfully, the barrister exam and the solicitor exam. It is both of these two exams are multiple choice exams, multi-hour multiple choice exams that are done one at a time. So you don't do them together. You'll do one day, you'll do another day, about a week or two later. And sometimes you can space it out. You can choose to do one in one session and then a few months later do the second one. The difference between the licensing exams and the exams for the qualification for the certificate of qualification at the earlier stage that we talked about is that most of your educational requirements, whether you're a JD student or an ITL coming through the NCA route, most of the examinations and the work that you do will be fact-based. So they'll be scenario-based, there'll be a lot of writing, there'll be some research components to it, whereas the licensing requirement or the licensing exams are all multiple choice. So using different skill sets to be able to complete those requirements is something to keep in mind. Being able to understand how to do fact-based exams or fact-based thinking is really important. And then being able to ensure that you have the capacity to quickly and carefully digest and understand the multiple choice format is something to keep in mind as well. A third licensing requirement is a good character requirement, and that is a form that you'll have to fill out if you're about to complete the licensing requirement. So as we've said, the pathway to becoming a lawyer in Ontario and in Canada, there are a couple of differences in some of the other provinces, really embraces these two requirements. So it takes a lot, as you know. And I think one of the reasons why that legal landscape can be so ominous is because people have spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of money to get the credentials that they need to become a lawyer in Canada, both through their educational and through their licensing requirements. And therefore, when you get to be called to the bar, when you're formally a lawyer in Canada, then you sometimes wonder, where do you go? What are the opportunities? What are the possibilities that you need to think about as you move forward? And so what I wanted to do is just spend a little bit of time thinking about what those possibilities are so that you have a sense of the options, the different routes that are possible for you in your overall career. And let's talk about, first of all, legal employment options. So in terms of the possibilities, once you graduate, pardon me, once you complete both the educational requirements and the licensing requirements and are called to the bar in any of the provinces in Ontario, with the exception of Quebec, and I don't want to speak about the civil system, you are called to the bar in Ontario as both a barrister and a solicitor, which means that you can do absolutely anything. You're eligible to do absolutely anything that lawyers are able to do. You can do transactional work as a solicitor. You can do a variety of litigation work as a barrister. You can do a combination of the two. The one thing to keep in mind as you think about what your legal employment options would be and what you really like, think back to that first video about what you like, what you're good at, what you can get good at, what you value, is to think about, first of all, ensuring that you have the capacity and that you have the ability to do the work that you're saying that you're going to do. What do I mean about that, and why do I say that's important? as members of the bar in Ontario, for example, and it's the same in all of the provinces, you're expected to show competence. And one of the things that is to be remembered is it's really unwise to dabble in different practice areas. Oftentimes, especially if you've had very, very supportive family and friends as you've gone through the earlier stages, it's so easy to get drawn into the possibility of saying, "Oh, sure, I'll help you out in your X file, even if you've never worked on that type of file. You may have studied it for the licensing exam, a will, for example, but you've been focusing most of your time in litigation and aren't really too sure about all of the requirements for doing wills. Unless you get additional training, unless you do a little bit of additional research, dabbling is really not something that you want to do. So think about what your practice area is, what your preferred practice area is or are, because you could do multiple practice areas, and try and really hone in on those skills. Now, I want to say something. When I suggest that you should hone in and not dabble, I don't mean that you cannot switch practice areas down the road. Of course, you can switch practice areas. It's a little harder to do, and you may have to go back and do some additional training and some additional um, schooling, but it's not impossible to switch practice areas. Most people typically will stay within either the barrister or the solicitor field as they grow into their legal careers. Typically, I hear people saying, I really don't, I'm not one who can appear and argue in a court or in an administrative tribunal. I don't like the litigation side. However, I really do like working problems with my clients and figuring out solutions on the solicitor side in a variety of different ways. The business area, wills and estates, real estates, complex securities matters, for example. And so that is a possibility to think about. Which kind of role do you have a preference for or a leaning towards? And of course, on the litigation side, there are so many different possibilities from family litigation to general civil litigation to administrative law before tribunals to working in professional negligence to tort law to criminal law. I don't know if I've said that already. And of course, to commercial litigation, where you hope that your colleagues on the solicitor side have gotten things right, but when there's a dispute, litigators come in and help to resolve that. And of course, even within litigation, there are multiple ways of engaging in the practice of litigation. So, for example, in family law, a number of people work in a collaborative family law setting. Some people choose to work in mediation so that they take disputes outside of the traditional court system. So, even when you think about practice areas, there are a lot of options for you to choose from. And first of all, if you are watching this and you are at the either before going to law school or during law school stage, you don't have to get it and pinpoint an area right at that stage. Allow yourself to be exposed to a variety of different possibilities. Allow yourself to speak with people who are exposed to a variety of different practice areas. Figure out what really moves you. Do you really like environmental law? Do you like criminal law? Do you really like securities or mergers and acquisitions? These are some of the things that you'll only really get a good handle on by getting exposure to those areas, reading in about those areas, and talking to different people about these things. So practice areas is the one thing when we talk about legal employment options. Then let's look at the different ways that you can engage in those kinds of the kind of work that you're thinking about. So practice areas is one part of the equation. The next is what kind of settings would you want to be in? And again, this is where your values really come in. What expectations do you have about the way that you want your work environment to be, the way that you want your work and life to be structured? So private practice is, first of all, there's variations even within these four options that I listed here: private practice, in-house, government, clinics, and NGOs. Private practice can run the gamut from you operating on your own as a solopreneur, as a sole practitioner, one person who is sort of running their own practice, dealing with their own clients, making their own decisions. And there's some benefits, of course, and some challenges with each of the options that are available to you. So you have to think about what you really are interested in, able, and value as you think about the options. Private practice can also include being in a smaller firm with two, three, four, five, 10 other people. And that would be in the early years, probably as an associate, but it could then be later on as a partner, either income or equity partner. Many lawyers later on in their career choose partnership, and others choose not to be partners. They may continue on as senior associates. Again, understanding the different elements along the way of being an associate, being a senior associate, being an income and equity partner, being a counsel within private practice. You don't always need to necessarily become a partner within a firm. That's something that you can choose to do if that is appropriate to what your goals are. So private practice, we've talked about sole practitioners, we've talked about small firms, and then of course there are mid-size and very large national and multinational firms operating in Canada and abroad. With regards to the firms, you want to be able to talk to as many as you can and figure out what kind of setting that you're interested in. And let's not also forget that the different settings, you may be in an urban setting and work in private practice within a very busy city, Toronto, Ontario, Vancouver, in London, Ontario. You might be in Calgary, for example, or you might be out in the East Coast in some of the bigger cities. That's a possibility. But a number of lawyers also practice in private practice in smaller centers as well. And you'll join me in the third session when we talk about building your communities. There's a difference in terms of how communities of lawyers and professional communities will interact. So again, thinking about what you want. Sometimes people love big firms and they like being parts of large teams and being part of a larger group with perhaps additional resources that might exist. And other times people want to be their own boss or within a smaller group. So all of these options within private practice are absolutely appropriate. It's just a matter of figuring out what you want. The second list on the list of employment options is in-house. So what do we mean by that? In-house means that there is an organization, a company, that rather than outsourcing some or all of its work to a private practice firm, will bring somebody in. Now, in-house again runs the gamut. Some organizations have one person who is their in-house legal department, depending on the size of the company. And other organizations will have hundreds of lawyers with very specific areas of practice. So I'll give you an example. If you have a smaller organization, you may be acting as in-house counsel and then balancing both those solicitor roles that we talked about and the barrister role. So you might be dealing a little bit of litigation, about a little bit of employment law, a little bit of marketing and IP work, a little bit of the real estate if your company is involved in buying or leasing real estate for that matter. You might be the only person, the only legal person there who is giving advice to your one client who is the company. And so sometimes I've heard a number of associates in private practice firms really interested in moving into an in-house area. However, the solo in-house may not be something that they're interested in because they've been used to larger groups. And in in-house legal departments, you could very well have larger groups, such as at banks, where they have some who are involved specifically for the litigation pieces that come to the banks. Others are in regulatory work. Others are in securities work specifically. So they may have a large number of lawyers working in their in-house legal departments, but each with a different focus. And again, I think just being able to understand what is it about in-house legal that allows that you would want to experience. And there are various levels of in-house counsel. So you might start off as a junior in-house counsel, and your goal might be to be ultimately the general counsel for the organization. And there's a variety of different titles that are part of the GC world as well. The next on that list is government. And in government, totally confess that until a few years ago, about 15 years ago, when I got the great honor and pleasure of working in the provincial government through the Ministry of Attorney General for a period of a year, I had not really appreciated the tremendous work that government lawyers do. And government lawyers can be at all across all levels. So you can have municipal governments that have legal departments and legal teams, provincial governments that have legal departments, and I'll speak to that in a second. And of course, the federal government has legal departments across the country as well. And the amount of variety that is possible for you to grow a career in government is incredible. And many people, I think, underestimate it. I was really impressed with the number of people, very, very talented and hardworking people who are working, in pursuance of the public service in government, and they were across different sections. So again, whether it's the Ministry of Financial Services or whether it's the Ministry of Education, there are people who are working in barrister roles and in litigation related roles or advocacy roles. There are people who are doing financial matters and real estate and solicitor work. And again, the amount of opportunities within government is really quite incredible. And the careers that I've seen develop by a number of people who have chosen career paths in government can be very rewarding. Clinics and NGOs are a fourth bucket that I talk about. Legal clinics, again, offer specific work across different practice areas, different possibilities, different areas, and are really, from what I've spoken with a number of people, quite satisfying and quite fulfilling work for people to do. They have their challenges, like each and every one of these possibilities has, in terms of workload, in terms of the emotional nature of some of the work that clinics do, but the satisfaction that clinical lawyers often tell me they have in their careers is second to none. And that also applies to non-governmental opportunities, NGOs that take lawyers into their positions. It's sort of like an in-house role, but for non-governmental opportunities. So here we have described, in terms of legal employment options, when you consider practice areas, the multitude of practice areas, and when you consider the multitude uh, of of uh, locations or areas, or not practice areas, but types of workplaces where you could explore and expand and develop those skills that you learned in law school. There are so many. And one of the things that I see too often is lawyers and law graduates really focused on one path. They haven't yet pushed the navigation system to say what other paths are possible, or if I'm feeling tired, or if I'm feeling like I have reached the pinnacle of what I can learn in this role, what else is possible, either within your organization or within a different possible location or organization. Press that navigation guide and start thinking about different paths or different routes. And what I always say to clients as well, you might be really, really happy in the organization and in the role that you are, which is fabulous. Every couple of years, do a check-in. Do a check-in with yourself in terms of whether or not you're still finding the joy, finding the challenge, finding the excitement, finding the fulfillment that you're hoping for. Every couple of years, just do a check-in with yourself to make sure that that's still there, whether you are in one practice area, another practice area, or within any of these four types of organizations. And then what I wanted to talk about is other career paths. And with other career paths, oftentimes I will have clients, and I was there too. Over 30 years ago, I was enjoying my litigation and family law practice, but something was feeling off about me being in that practice, in private practice. And while I didn't explore the other three types of routes that we talked about beforehand, what came to me was a law adjacent career. So what I mean by that, because when you think about other career paths, it could either be law adjacent, and I'll give you some examples in a moment about that, or it could be something completely different from law entirely, something completely outside of law that has no relationship to your legal training necessarily, but has built some skills that are very, very relatable. And so when I talk about law adjacent careers, what do I mean? First of all, there are so many legal research, legal operations, legal marketing, legal recruitment, um, uh, business related roles, politics, journalism, teaching, oftentimes within law. There's so many different possibilities where you're still touching up against the law in one way, shape, or form. Compliance is another, regulatory compliance is another area that oftentimes is seen as a law adjacent practice. So when you're dealing with law or legally related matters, but not as a practicing lawyer, you are using your degree very specifically and your training very specifically. One of the biggest challenges I have been told, and that I know that I experienced myself when I was making the transition, was that thought. Remember how we said earlier on how much of an investment of time, energy, and money goes into your legal training and your legal licensing. And sometimes when you're about to make a change, you think back to that and you think, oh, how am I going to leave all that behind? My comment is you're not leaving anything behind. There are different paths that you can take that are always building one on top of the other. And so go forth. If you're feeling like there's some other pathway for you, go forth. And I'll also add the following. I have had many friends and colleagues and clients who have left law altogether for various reasons. They were growing a different skill set. They were growing a different interest, and their lives may have changed for various reasons. A number of our authors in the Career Conversations Book Club were former lawyers who became authors full time and in non-law related genres. So it really is possible to have pride and faith and confidence in the process that got you to a particular stage, and then look to another off ramp. Just to use that analogy that we had at the very beginning, use another off ramp and follow a new direction. That's equally as satisfying to you. The point for all of this, of course, is to think about the map ahead of you, to really be intentional about the pathway and the journey, to allow yourself the serendipity to take an off ramp if you want a possibility that you may not have even thought about. It helps to know a little bit about the landscape, but sometimes journeys also take you where you may not expect. Understand the legal landscape, have the language, have the map with you, and be intentional as much as you can about your journey. I hope that you have found this beneficial. I hope that you have found it helpful. Please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I've got the note there, and I keep flipping forward with this. My apologies. My YouTube channel is at Gina Alexandra's Career Coach. And of course, if you found this beneficial, share it with a friend, and look out for next month's Career Confidence Corner theme, which we're going to be talking about consistently growing your professional community. Some call it networking. I think it's better just to call it growing your professional community. Stay tuned. Join me next time, and I hope you're all safe. And finally, I just wanted to remind you, feel free to stay in touch. I love getting people reaching out to me either by email, on my website, or on LinkedIn. Really, really great to have this chance to speak with you. So remember, number one, know your values. Think about your priorities and your skills. First part. Second part today, know the legal landscape, and join us for the next sessions next month. Take care, everyone.